Does the UK need to come out of the EU to stop the flow of immigrants living in this country?
Chukwuemeka.
I think in terms of people's concerns, all they ask is that we have properly controlled borders, that we don't have people coming in and undercutting British workers, and that they are not exploited themselves. But I certainly don't think that pulling out of the EU would be a good thing for our economy. The EU is our nearest and biggest market, and it's actually the key that unlocks the door to many of these emerging markets.
And that overrides any concern your party might have, remembering they apologised for what they did on immigration, on the flow of immigrants into this country.
Well, I don't think that we got everything right on immigration. I don't think that pulling out of the EU is necessarily going to solve that problem. And I also don't think doing one of those classic things that people sometimes do when you're going through adversity, blaming the other for the problems that we face, is a way that we're actually going to ensure that we win in the future.
You've seen the latest net migration figures, which are pretty much the size of the city of Southampton last year. Are those numbers, for you, acceptable? Right?
Well, I think we would like to see immigration come down.
Nigel Farage.
Well, it's a very good question. And the answer is yes. I mean, either you want to have an immigration policy or you don't. And when I hear Chucky use the word control, we need to control our borders. And if I hear it from anybody else on the panel, let's be frank, we have signed up through a series of treaties in Brussels to a total, unrestricted, open door. 485 million people have the right to come and live and settle in this country. And in the first 3 decades of our EEC/EU membership, no one noticed, because actually we all had roughly similar living standards, similar education systems, similar healthcare. Then we let in, it was Labour that did it, a series of countries, 8 countries, that had not long been out of communism, who in many cases have not actually readjusted to being the kinds of countries in terms of culture that we were. We've extended that to Romania and Bulgaria. You know, our minimum wage is 9 times that of Romania. And now we have in the Eurozone a catastrophe in the Mediterranean, with youth unemployment at 60% in some of those countries. And I think the numbers we've seen from the EU already are as nothing to what we're going to see over the course of the next 3 to 4 years. And my argument, and I wouldn't dispute, that controlled immigration can be a big net benefit to Britain economically and culturally and everything else. But we have no control. And we've no idea next year whether 200,000 are coming, 500,000 are coming, 800,000 are coming. There is nothing we can do. And I would advocate that one of the big benefits of not being a member of the European Union is we get back control of our borders so that we can decide who comes to Britain. We shouldn't be discriminating against people from India and New Zealand, which we currently do because we have an open door to Romania and Bulgaria. Let's have our own immigration policy and let's control not just the quantity of who comes to Britain, but the quality of who comes to Britain.
Let's not forget what Nigel said.
Yes, you sir.
I think the policies are wrong to start with. Why should we be able to just turn up in this country and expect everything that they can get over here? So why not have jobs that are open to them, so they can come in here, a bit like Australia or America, where you have the green card or whatever to go over, so you apply for what you get when you come here. Don't have an issue with the people coming over here with the hospitals and everything. We have a minimum wage as well.
Does the UK need to pull out of Europe to control immigration was the question. And the answer is we want you to be able to have a say in this. I believe that immigration has benefited this country. I believe that it's important that people are allowed to travel around a free market, which includes people being able to move around.
Why don't you tell them the truth?
What he said was, we want you to have your say.
Yeah, but the question was, do we have to pull out of the EU to control immigration? And Grant says, I haven't got an opinion, it's up to you in a referendum. Well, we've heard all that before. David Cameron was promising one at the last European elections and didn't deliver. Come on, let's be honest. You, along with Labour, the Lib Dems, the Greens, the political establishment in Britain, have all voted
You are the establishment.
at every given
been an
opportunity.
MEP for 15 years.
At every,
You're the
well,
establishment.
I tell you what, they haven't tamed me yet, all right?
Nigel, you've
you not the establishment.
They haven't
You
tamed
are
me
the
yet.
establishment.
And Grant, No party has been keener on the free movement of peoples within the European Union than the Conservatives, so much so that your leader even wants Turkey to join the European Union with free movement to be extended.
All right,
wait, 80 million
Nigel.
people.
I do think we should have an in-out referendum, and if we were to have such a referendum, the Green Party would be voting to stay in.
Will anybody admit immigration from Europe has got out of hand?
Yes, I will.
He will.
Yes, I will.
All right. Well, hold on. You know Nigel Farage will. Who do you want to admit it? Shukla?
Any of them.
Any of them.
Not from Nigel. Nobody's even taking it on the, taking it on.
Grant chance.
Well, it's not out of hand.
First of all,
Too many.
First of all, there's a
Especially in
whole...
Southampton.
When people like Nigel say things like, when I'm on a bus or a train, I feel uncomfortable, but was it awkward if I hear people speaking another language other than English? I think that's kind of ugly. So let's have a calm and rational debate. I do, actually.
Do you think,
I do.
So,
I do.
So do you not think that people coming to this country in reasonable controlled numbers, learning English and integrating and becoming part of us is not important? I think it's very, very important indeed. Very important. Very important. Surely, the essence of this question is about should we pull out of the EU so that we can control immigration? And my argument is that unless we can control the numbers that come into Britain, we will not get integration, we will get increasing separation within our communities, and that, I think, is something that nobody wants.
All right. Hold on a second. You, sir.
I just want to say, we're talking about the EU and we're saying about coming in or out of the EU for immigration. There's hundreds more reasons to be doing it and against it, so for and against. But I'm sort of quite proud to say that I'm only quite a young chap, and I'm only just getting into politics and quite enjoying it as well. And I feel that the only way I can go is that these decisions to go in the EU were made before I had a choice and a stance to say. And I think the referendum gives people that are getting interested in politics and that are younger to redo that. And I don't think it's a bad thing to go back and sometimes relook at the balance and say, all our heads are better, 50 heads are better than one.
We're getting distracted, I think, in the whole EU discussion by what we can only describe as issues like, for example, tossing to and fro party views on immigration and things of that kind. I read yesterday in the newspaper, the American newspapers, the devastating effects of climate change. The only people who can do anything serious about climate change are not individual countries like the UK or Germany or France. It's the whole lot together who have some chance of doing something about that, as they had to have some chance of doing something about organised crime. And I'm not in the business here of making sort of party points, except one, which I must make. I must make it to, in fact, Nigel, who I actually respect. I think he's a highly intelligent man. He's also great fun to have a drink with. But let me put.
That's after the programme.
Let me put one serious question to him. His people in the European Parliament voted against a directive from the EU to limit and stop human trafficking. Human trafficking of children and people who are dragged into this country as semi-slaves. Now, I think Nigel's got to take a grip on his party because he's got some very funny characters in it.
Hang on, Shirley. I'm
sorry, I'm not being rude. I just want to say that because I gave you a precise example which really bothers me.
You have pushed, as a Liberal Democrat Party, very strongly in Brussels and Strasbourg, the idea of justice and home affairs becoming issues that move from the jurisdiction of the British Parliament to the European institutions. And you can talk about people trafficking and all the rest of it, but it's your party that sponsored the European arrest warrant that led to a guy from North London with no prima facie evidence being presented to a British court, being taken, dumped for a year in a hellhole in Greece without facing charge. Since Magna Carta in this country, we've had habeas corpus, the presumption of innocence before guilt, and I'm afraid that they're the things that you... And you call yourself a Liberal party, and you've thrown them away.
And we've had
so that's why I don't support any of them.
From a practical perspective, if net immigration is the size of the city of Southampton, where are they all going to live? Rents are spiralling out of control as it is. Where are my children going to find a house to live?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the reason that we have housing problems right now is because we have the lowest rate of new builds since the 1920s. And again, to go to the point that was made earlier, we can blame all our problems on the EU if we want, but actually we've got to sort them out here. That is a responsibility of government.
David, the argument that we can battle for Britain has been given lied to under freedom of information requests in 55 occasions since 1996, so mostly under a Labour government, partly under a coalition, on 55 occasions at the Council of Ministers, the British government have said, we are going to fight hard against this directive, and we have lost on all 55 occasions.
I think
Let's
what we're
stop banging our heads against the brick walls and recognise that we're not winning, we're not succeeding, and we ought to be governing our own country and making our own laws. Surely that makes more sense.
Surely what we're witnessing here are two extremes. One party, the Labour Party, that will not give you an in-out referendum on Europe. The other party, UKIP, who say they want one, but admit at the same time they cannot deliver. That's why the Conservative approach, in-out referendum, is the only feasible solution to this. People of our generation, with the exception of Shirley, have never been given a say. Let's renegotiate it and put it to the British people.
And vote to stay in is what you want to do.
And vote how you like, Nigel.
Maybe Cameron wants to say,
Can I ask you one very simple question? Why is it always renegotiate and then have a referendum? Why not just have a referendum?
Because if you had...
Bob off the electorate. That's what it's all about.
No, because if you had a referendum without actually having agreed what the subject was, in other words...
The subject is, should you be in or out of Europe?
But there's a better option, isn't there? The better option is, rather than just say these two extreme positions, it's all fine, as Chucker will tell you, or it's all disastrous, as Nigel will tell you, actually you can do things like renegotiate the position when new countries join Europe.
How do you avoid it being the trick that Harold Wilson paid? When he renegotiated just a little bit and then had everybody say, go for it.
For this simple reason. Number one,
I remember because I voted in that. You voted in that too.
For this simple reason. People like the two of you will remind us that that was the trick and we won't fall for it again. And secondly, because it will be up to everybody else to make the decision, has enough of renegotiation taken place? Have we returned powers to this country? Have we come to a position which people are comfortable with, and then give people an in-out referendum?
Yourself and Caroline and Chucker and your colleagues in the political elite, what you miss about UKIP is that the motivation for what you do politically is almost as important as what you do. So the fact you've now offered a referendum is great, but you'll never claim the political credit for it, because you were forced into a position where you had to. Cameron reneged on his cast-iron promise. Let me finish, Grant. Let me finish, then you can come back. Let me finish. And now you're saying, well, we'll put it to you. And people are saying, we don't, as an electorate, it's a funny kind of relationship we have, but we want to be led as much as we want you to listen. Okay. And what UKIP have done is they've put their finger on a problem that concerns a lot of people, and they've led. Okay. What you've all done in the mainstream media and the metropolitan elite is you've responded to things happening because you don't understand what life is like for people out there in Britain. You don't understand it. So how can...
Caroline Lucas wants to respond to you, and then, of course, Grant Shapps.
Well, I think that gentleman has put his finger absolutely on something incredibly important, because, when people look at people who are going to vote UKIP, and sometimes they're very rude and say, oh, they're racist or they're bigots or whatever, I don't think that's the case. I think they're very angry. I think probably many of you are very, very angry. And that's because it feels to you, I'm sure, as it does to many, that the political elite at Westminster simply doesn't understand your lives. When you look in on them at Westminster, it feels as if...
One point, we don't know what will happen in the future, but if we've got elected representatives who we trust, we know that they will deal with the situation in a way that we would want them to. So we don't have this kind of direct democracy.
All right, Grant Shapps, it was addressed to you.
You don't have the trust at the moment.
The biggest lie that needs to be quashed is that there was somehow a referendum promised in a previous manifesto. That is not the case. OK, well, show me the page, Nigel. Well, hold on a minute. Yeah. We're talking about the manifesto upon which this Conservative-led government got elected, and there was no referendum in there.
2009 European elections, you said, vote for us and we will guarantee you a referendum if we get into
Nigel, before you...
Nigel. I'm sorry.
Your posters display, and I saw one the other day, a man in the back of the car saying that your taxpayers' money funds his millionaire lifestyle. Actually, our taxpayers' money funds yourselves as well, going over there, not turning up to do the job for which you're paid to do.
Either we go, you really can't have this argument both ways. Either we do turn up and enjoy the luxury lifestyle, or we don't turn up. You can't have it both ways. What we want to do We are the turkeys that would vote for Christmas. We want to get rid of British MEPs. We want to get rid of British commissioners. We don't need any of this to trade and cooperate with our next-door neighbours in Europe.
I don't think people want to pay for key NHS services, like going to see your GP, as Nigel would have you do that. I don't think people want to give the top 1% a massive tax. That's your manifesto. I mean, you set yourselves up as somehow the voice of working people. You would do so many things which would do unbelievable damage to my community.
Help us with the manifesto. That's very kind.
I thought you didn't have what your policies are. We don't know what your policies are. We don't know what your policies are.
Hang on, but you don't have a manifesto anymore, do you? Isn't that right?
None of the parties.
You've abandoned... You specifically don't. You abandoned...
Nor do you. None of us have an election manifesto for next year. Let's be clear about that.
I'm old enough to have read about McCarthyism, and I'm old enough to have read the River of Blood speech.
Enoch Powell's speech.
Enoch Powell's speech.
Enoch Powell's speech, yes.
And the point is...
And I'm also aware of what happens in elections where a climate of fear is caused amongst the electorate by the charismatic, the bombastic, and to me, the very dangerous. This has driven Europe to war in the past. I have no time for you, sir. None.
You're a very lucky fella, because there are 4 parties on this platform that you can vote for. There are 4 parties on this platform that believe we should not govern our own country, we should surrender our democracy, and we should have the vast majority of our laws made somewhere else, over which we have virtually no say. If that's what you want, that's fine. But be aware of one thing. Firstly, we're giving people a choice. We want to trade and cooperate with Europe but not be governed by their institutions. But recognise this. Recognise this. The European dream is failing and crumbling. We, thank goodness, did not join the Eurozone. This whole political project, in a decade's time, is headed for disaster for tens of millions of European peoples. And the irony...
There you are.
The irony,
there you
and the
go.
irony is this.
There
the irony
you go.
is
Now,
this.
I can talk over you just as you can talk over me.
This will lead
you are
to the very
merely
extremes.
putting
Wait, just wait a second. Bring your remarks to a conclusion.
The point is, sir, that actually what's happening is the very nationalisms and intolerances and extremisms the EU was supposed to stop, it's creating because of the disastrous failure that is called the Eurozone. It doesn't actually work.
Is the intervention of the US in the search for the abducted Nigerian girls likely to inflame the situation and provoke Boko Haram to more violence?
Yeah, it's a good question, because what American military intervention in Afghanistan and Iraq has done, of course with the support of the Labour government and the Conservative opposition, what actually it's done is to not stabilise those countries or make them better, but to actually leave behind a very bitter legacy and the split behind, tens of millions of Islamic people and the Americans to be wider than ever before. So I understand the nature and the tenor of your question, but I think in this particular occasion we should recognise there's a massive difference between sending an army into a country looking for regime change and doing something for purely humanitarian reasons. And I think, thank goodness Obama, it may have been delayed, but thank goodness Obama said what he said, because it's actually got the whole international community saying something must be done. And for once, I'd be quite happy if we would help the Americans and go out there and try and find these girls. I really would.
Now, I'm going to take one last question, very quickly.
Being from Afghanistan, my family is in Afghanistan. And I agree 100% with Nigel Farage that Americans, when they go somewhere, they ruin that country. They've done that to Afghanistan, they've done to Iraq. So rather than humanitarian things, we don't want them to go there, gun blazing, and ruin Nigeria.
Shareholders or politicians decide the outcome of Pfizer's bid to buy AstraZeneca.
This is this huge bid. It last stood at £63 billion, the biggest ever takeover, I believe, of a British company. And the question is, do the politicians decide whether it should go ahead, or the people who are shareholders in the companies?
If we come out of Europe, you have to renegotiate everything. Europe creates tax regimes which mean that Tata, Nissan, Toyota, and if Pfizer get their hands on it, AstraZeneca, go over to Europe. We lose the skills base. We're marginalised. That is the real fear. That is the economic
Right.
fear facing this country.
Nigel Farage, you haven't to say, is this
Peter,
going to be in your manifesto? Is this
It
the
won't
UKIP
be
manifesto?
the shareholders that decide. It won't be the people that decide. It won't be Parliament that
He's gonna
decides.
say Europe.
It will not be
He's
the
gonna
British
say
government that decides. And the weasel,
He's gonna say
lies
It's
you have
good.
heard
It's Europe's
from these
fault.
three parties
As ever,
on
it's
this
Europe's
panel,
The Enterprise
and you
Act
listen
is
to
a
them, and you listen,
British
and they say,
act.
"Oh, the law needs to be changed."
Yeah, it's all Europe.
Enterprise Act is a
This
British
All right,
decision-
let Nigel
this
Farage,
decision-
let Nigel
you-
Farage just finish his sentence.
It's all Europe.
You are either
It's all Europe.
willfully lying to these people,
I'm not
or you're
lying to
pig,
anyone.
or you're pig ignorant,
Oh,
or you're
Nigel.
pig
Oh,
ignorant.
resort to abuse.
Vince Cable,
Resort to
Vince
abuse.
Cable, in this debate, when he was pushed by John Redwood, admitted the ultimate decision as to whether AstraZeneca could be taken
I was in
over
that debate.
by
He didn't do
Pfizer
that. He
will be
didn't do that.
taken.
He didn't
you see,
do that.
You see,
All
this
right,
is why
Nigel,
will be
Nigel.
taken by the European Commission.
Nigel Farage.
We have given away.
I was there.
We have
Nigel.
given away.
No,
We
wait.
have given
Hey,
away
listen,
the ability.
everybody. Steady
You
on,
see-
steady on,
you see-
steady on,
you see,
steady on.
And this is what it's like. Well, we've
Nigel.
had years of this from these people.
Nigel Farage.
There is an enormous elephant in the room.
Nigel Farage.
There is-
Nigel Farage, will you listen to me just for a moment?
Yeah.
And that's the end of the debate. If Britain pulls out of the EU, are you saying that a British government would be able to stop takeovers
Yes,
like this?
absolutely.
Fine, thank you. Quite
Absolutely.
All right.